Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the bustling, smoky world of ancient Rome. You're not watching it from a museum, and you're definitely not a tourist. No, you're waking up in it. Right now, imagine the faint grey light of dawn squeezing through a crack in a crooked wooden shutter. You're curled up on a scratchy straw mattress of pillows, no blankets, just you, a few fleas, and the hard reality of a Roman morning. The air is dense with the scent of smoke, mouldy bread, and something vaguely sour that might be your neighbour's foot. And no, your alarm didn't go off. That racket? It's a flock of roosters screaming like they've got a vendetta. They're not alone. Outside your thin wall of clay and wood, vendors are already shouting about olives, stale fish, and last night's bread. A donkey somewhere is having a full-blown existential crisis, and your neighbour's kid is crying again, probably because his only toy is a carved-out gourd with a string attached. You're not lounging in some villa, you're in an insulant. Rome's version of an apartment building. Except this one leans slightly to the left, has walls made of whatever was cheapest, and absolutely no insulation. The guy above you just emptied his chamber pot out the window again. It drips past yours and lands somewhere in the alley with a sound that makes you glad you're not out there. Let's just admit it, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink into the dawn light, and the first thing you realise, besides your complete lack of personal space, is that you're cold. Not winter cold, just stone cold. The kind of chill that settles into your bones, because Roman buildings weren't exactly known for their central heating. If you're lucky, there's a brazier still smouldering in the corner. If you're unlucky, your mate used the last bit of charcoal last night to cook a mouse on a stick. Yes, that happened. You sit up, wincing as bits of straw cling to your tunic. It's the only tunic you own, and it's about one bad sneeze away from becoming a dishcloth. The floor beneath you is packed earth, hard as rock, and somewhere near your foot, you hear the unmistakable rustle of something with too many legs scurrying away. A Roman sunrise doesn't come gently. There are no birds tweeting sweet melodies and no soft glow of morning light. It's more like the entire street punches you awake with a club made of noise and responsibility. Cobblers are already hammering away. Bakers have been up since long before you. The guy who sells boiled snails is doing his warm-up. And guess what? You're late. Work begins early, especially if you're not rich enough to recline on marble floors and sip diluted wine while dictating scrolls. You've got to move, fast, but first you've got to get out of this hole of a room, and that's a mini obstacle course all on its own. Clambering down the rickety wooden ladder, because stairs are too luxurious for this part of town, you land in the narrow common space that smells like everyone's morning breath combined. Someone's already stolen the good bucket of water. Great. Let's talk about Roman fire safety for a second, because historians still argue whether insulae were death traps by design or by simple negligence. What we do know is that fires were so frequent and devastating that Rome had entire cohorts of firefighters called the Vigiles. Unfortunately, those guys mostly protected rich neighbourhoods. You've got a bucket, a prayer, and walls made of wood soaked in centuries of bad decision. But enough about imminent disaster. Back to your morning. You stumble through the alley, dodging piles of who knows what and stepping over a passed-out drunk who may or may not be snoring in Latin. You squeeze past a street vendor setting up early and he eyes you suspiciously. You don't blame him. You smell like a combination of old bread and failure. Funny thing, scholars are still debating how noisy ancient Rome really was. Some argue it was overwhelming with constant street hawkers, carts, animals and shouting. Others think it depended heavily on the neighbourhood, but one thing's certain, this part of town isn't quiet. The street is already alive with humanity. Women carry water jugs, kids chase stray cats, and an old man yells at a cloud. In a city that some believe had over 1 million residents at its peak, yes, really, personal space is a myth. You are always touching someone, even if you don't want to be. And if you're wondering where the nearest shop is, congratulations, you're standing in front of one. The front of someone's one-room home doubles as a storefront. There's a man selling fabric scraps that look like they've survived a war. Someone else is roasting chickpeas in a brazier and trying to convince passers-by that they're fresh. One poor guy is hawking dried fish. You can smell it before you see it. You overhear a heated argument about whether Jupiter or Mars is the superior god to pray to during harvest season. You'd think they'd care more about who controls plumbing, considering the open sewage drains crisscrossing the street. And speaking of smells, let's just take a moment. The olfactory experience of ancient Rome is not for the faint of heart. Imagine a blend of animal sweat, human sweat, fermenting vegetables, urine, incense, and street food. Add in the occasional whiff of rotting fish, and you've got the official perfume of the empire. By now, your stomach is growling. Or maybe that's the donkey again. Either way, you realize you've got to find breakfast, or at least something vaguely chewable. But that's a problem for the next section. Right now, your sandals are falling apart, your breath could stop a centurion, and your eyes are still adjusting to the unfiltered chaos of the street. You lean against a wall that might be older than democracy itself and try to catch your breath. It's going to be a long day. And spoiler alert, it gets worse. You haven't even been awake for half an hour, and already you're wondering how anyone survived this empire for longer than a week. As you shuffle down the street, blinking through the haze of early morning smoke and ducking beneath suspiciously wet laundry dripping from windows, you're about to experience the joy of a true Roman morning routine. Spoiler it does not include coffee. First stop, basic hygiene, and by basic, we mean horrifying by modern standards. You make your way toward the communal fountain, the nearest source of water that hasn't been blessed by the neighbour's chamber pot. Romans were surprisingly advanced in their aqueduct system, pumping fresh water from miles away into city fountains, baths and latrines. But cleanliness? That's a relative term. You join a sluggish crowd of equally dishevelled Romans, all waiting their turn to splash icy water onto their faces like they're trying to exorcise the nightmares. There's no soap, no mirror, no privacy. You cup your hands and throw cold water onto your cheeks while trying not to make eye contact with the man next to you enthusiastically gargling and spitting into the drain. To cleanse the body more thoroughly, most Romans use a technique you probably won't be adding to your skincare routine. Olive oil and a metal strigil. Picture this. You slather yourself in oil, generally because apparently BO is part of the aesthetic, then scrape it off with a curved metal blade. It's like exfoliating with salad dressing and a shoehorn. Some scholars believe this routine was actually pretty effective for removing dirt, sweat, and dead skin. Others argue it mostly smeared the grime around and made you smell like a deep fryer. Either way, you give it a shot and immediately regret it. The oil is sticky, the strigil is cold, and you accidentally fling some muck onto your own sandal. You sigh and try not to cry. Now, dental care. Ready for this one? There are no toothbrushes, no minty toothpaste, no floss. If you're feeling fancy, you might rub crushed charcoal on your teeth with a cloth. The less fancy folks, they chew on twigs. That's right, twigs. You try one, and it tastes like bark-flavoured regret. And remember, the Roman diet includes a lot of wine, fish sauce, and unfiltered grains. Your breath smells like fermented olives and shame. The guy next to you is brushing his teeth with urine. Yes, urine. Romans believed it whitened teeth thanks to the ammonia. We don't recommend it. Some historians argue this was mostly done by the lower class, but others say even wealthier Romans imported Portuguese urine for their dental care. Imagine explaining that purchase at the ancient customs line. Oh, just a jug of pee for my smile. Hygiene's done. Sort of. You're now wet, oily, and covered in a thin layer of dust. Time to get dressed. Your tunic has not improved since yesterday. It's a simple rectangle of wool, sewn together at the shoulders and cinched with a belt. If you're lucky, it's been dyed a nice shade of dirt brown. The rich wear white or red. But those dyes are expensive and yours has a suspicious stain near the hem that might be old. Underwear? Optional. Most Romans skip it. You pull the tunic over your head and immediately begin to sweat. The wool is coarse and itchy, and the armpit seams are tighter than your will to live. Shoes? Leather sandals, held together by sheer optimism and a few knotted straps. Your pinky toe peeks out like it's trying to escape. You briefly consider going barefoot, but remember the street puddle and the rat you saw earlier playing tag with a cockroach. You step outside, ready for the next part of your day. But wait, hair. You reach up to smooth your bedraggled mop into something vaguely presentable. If you're a man, you probably wear your hair shortish and your beard cropped, unless you're going for that dramatic philosopher vibe. If you're a woman, you're expected to style your hair into intricate coils or buns held up with pins that double as potential weapons. You, unfortunately, have neither time nor hairpin, so you twist it back and hope no one important sees you. Personal grooming in Rome wasn't about looking good for yourself. It was about showing your place in society. Well-groomed, you're respectable. Dishevelled, you're suspicious. Clean-shaven, you're civilized. Beard like a goat, you're either a Greek scholar or a guy no one invites to parties. You try to strike the balance between not homeless and not rich enough to rob. And just when you think you've gotten through the worst part of the morning, let's be clear, togas are not casual wear. They are long, heavy, woolen monstrosities that take multiple folds, a decent arm span, and sometimes an assistant to wrap correctly. Wearing one feels like trying to assemble IKEA furniture using only a mirror and a bad attitude. But if you're male, a citizen, and planning to appear in public, you're expected to wear one. You give it a try. You trip. Twice. It drags in the mud. You accidentally tuck your arm inside the wrong fold and spend 5 minutes trying to figure out how to free it without flashing a leg. Eventually, you give up and just drape it over your shoulder like a sad burrito. It'll do. Historians still debate whether most people wore togas daily or only during official events. Many believe it was reserved for court appearances, elections, or religious ceremonies, or with Evering argue it was simply the social expectation in the capital. Either way, you feel ridiculous. As you walk, you notice others fidgeting with their clothing too. A woman nearby is adjusting her stola, the long, pleated dress Roman matrons wear, while trying to keep her palla, a shawl, from slipping off her shoulders. She makes it look easy. You suspect she's been doing this since birth. You, however, just stepped into history 30 minutes ago and already look like a toga-themed disaster. There's a reason many Romans had slaves or servants to help them dress. The upper class didn't suffer this alone. But you? You're sweating, tangled, and seriously considering inventing pants. As you round the corner back toward the market area, a neighbour waves at you with his striggle still in hand. He's eating an olive and doesn't seem to care that he's half-oiled and barefoot. "Nice morning," he calls. You nod weakly and wonder if it's too late to go back to bed. It is. Because now that you're vaguely clean, marginally dressed, and uncomfortably aware of your underarms, it's time to face the first meal of the day. But don't get excited. Roman breakfast is about to disappoint you. And so, you push forward into the crowd, your poorly wrapped toga flapping, your stomach growling like a caged lion, and your strigil tucked into your belt like the world's worst accessory. Welcome to Rome, baby. Your stomach is making noises loud enough to draw concern from passers-by. It's officially time for ientaculum, the Roman equivalent of breakfast, but let's set expectations. This is not your eggs-bacon kind of scene. There's no buttered croissant waiting, no cafe with oat milk lattes. You won't even find a table. You elbow your way toward the nearest thermopolium, a kind of ancient Roman street food stall that looks like a cross between a kitchen and a garage sale. It's a little stone shopfront with a counter built of brick and sun-bleached marble, punctuated by deep round holes lined with clay jars. Those jars are the hot table. You peer in, hoping for something appetizing, but you're met with what looks like soup, smells like fermented onions, and may or may not be yesterday's leftovers. The stall's owner, a grizzled man missing half his teeth and all his cheer, slaps a piece of hard bread onto the counter with a grunt. That's breakfast. It's called panis, a flat, dry, stone-textured lump of baked grain that has the mouthfeel of a floor tile and the flavour of disappointment. You try to bite it, nearly chip a tooth, and decide to soak it in the free cup of watered-down wine that comes with the meal. The wine is sour, sharp, and vaguely vinegary, probably cheap Posca, a diluted wine vinegar mix the lower classes drank when they couldn't afford the good stuff. Some say Roman soldiers swore by it. Others say it was just the only option they had that didn't make them go blind. You chew slowly, pretending to enjoy the experience. At least it's food. Interestingly, scholars still debate just how poor Roman diets really were. While the elite feasted on delicacies from across the empire, like flamingo tongues and stuffed dormice, most commoners relied on bread, porridge, legumes, cheese, and seasonal fruits. Meat was rare. Fish sauce, however, was everywhere. Garum, to be exact. If you're unfamiliar, imagine fish rotting in the sun until it becomes liquid. Then imagine pouring it on everything. That's garum. Nope, you don't get any today. That's a luxury condiment. What you do get is more bread, possibly with a few olives, if the vendor is feeling generous. You spot a jar of dates behind the counter and reach for one, only to have your hand slapped away. That's merenda food, more of a midday snack for those who can afford to snack. You step away from the stall, still chewing the rubbery bread, trying not to choke as it fuses to the roof of your mouth like edible cement. A young boy beside you offers to trade you a boiled egg for your last coin. You hesitate. The egg is suspiciously green around the edges. You decline. He shrugs and eats it anyway. It's at this moment you realise there is no breakfast hour in Rome. People just eat whenever their schedule and budget allow. There's no sitting down for a family meal, no warm pancakes stacked high. Meals are taken standing up, on the go, elbow to elbow with strangers while dogs circle your feet, hoping you'll drop something. And speaking of smells, let's just take a moment. The olfactory experience of ancient Rome is not for the faint of heart. Imagine a blend of animal sweat, human sweat, fermenting vegetables, urine, incense, and street food. Add in the occasional whiff of rotting fish, and you've got the official perfume of the empire. By now, your stomach is growling. Or maybe that's the donkey again. Either way, you realise you've got to find breakfast, or at least something vaguely chewable. But that's a problem for the next section. Right now, your sandals are falling apart, your breath could stop a centurion, and your eyes are still adjusting to the unfiltered chaos of the street. You lean against a wall that might be older than democracy itself and try to catch your breath. It's going to be a long day. And spoiler alert, it gets worse. You haven't even been awake for half an hour, and already you're wondering how anyone survived this empire for longer than a week. As you shuffle down the street, blinking through the haze of early morning smoke and ducking beneath suspiciously wet laundry dripping from windows, you're about to experience the joy of a true Roman morning routine. Spoiler it does not include coffee. First stop, basic hygiene, and by basic, we mean horrifying by modern standards. You make your way toward the communal fountain, the nearest source of water that hasn't been blessed by the neighbour's chamber pot. Romans were surprisingly advanced in their aqueduct system, pumping fresh water from miles away into city fountains, baths and latrines. But cleanliness? That's a relative term. You join a sluggish crowd of equally dishevelled Romans, all waiting their turn to splash icy water onto their faces, like they're trying to exorcise the nightmares. There's no soap, no mirror, no privacy. You cup your hands and throw cold water onto your cheeks, while trying not to make eye contact with the man next to you enthusiastically gargling and spitting into the drain. To cleanse the body more thoroughly, most Romans use a technique you probably won't be adding to your skincare routine. Olive oil and a metal strigil. Picture this. You slather yourself in oil, generally because apparently BO is part of the aesthetic, then scrape it off with a curved metal blade. It's like exfoliating with salad dressing and a shoehorn. Some scholars believe this routine was actually pretty effective for removing dirt, sweat, and dead skin. Others argue it mostly smeared the grime around and made you smell like a deep fryer. Either way, you give it a shot and immediately regret it. The oil is sticky, the strigil is cold, and you accidentally fling some muck onto your own sandal. You sigh and try not to cry. Now, dental care. Ready for this one? There are no toothbrushes, no minty toothpaste, no floss. If you're feeling fancy, you might rub crushed charcoal on your teeth with a cloth. The less fancy folks, they chew on twigs. That's right, twigs. You try one, and it tastes like bark-flavoured regret. And remember, the Roman diet includes a lot of wine, fish sauce, and unfiltered grains. Your breath smells like fermented olives and shame. The guy next to you is brushing his teeth with urine. Yes, urine. Romans believed it whitened teeth thanks to the ammonia. We don't recommend it. Some historians argue this was mostly done by the lower class, but others say even wealthier Romans imported Portuguese urine for their dental care. Imagine explaining that purchase at the ancient customs line. Oh, just a jug of pee for my smile. Hygiene's done. Sort of. You're now wet, oily, and covered in a thin layer of dust. Time to get dressed. Your tunic has not improved since yesterday. It's a simple rectangle of wool, sewn together at the shoulders and cinched with a belt. If you're lucky, it's been dyed a nice shade of dirt brown. The rich wear white or red, but those dyes are expensive and yours has a suspicious stain near the hem that might be old. Underwear? Optional. Most Romans skip it. You pull the tunic over your head and immediately begin to sweat. The wool is coarse and itchy, and the armpit seams are tighter than your will to live. Shoes? Leather sandals, held together by sheer optimism and a few knotted straps. Your pinky toe peeks out like it's trying to escape. You briefly consider going barefoot, but remember the street puddle and the rat you saw earlier playing tag with a cockroach. You step outside, ready for the next part of your day. But wait, hair. You reach up to smooth your bedraggled mop into something vaguely presentable. If you're a man, you probably wear your hair shortish and your beard cropped, unless you're going for that dramatic philosopher vibe. If you're a woman, you're expected to style your hair into intricate coils or buns held up with pins that double as potential weapons. You, unfortunately, have neither time nor hairpin, so you twist it back and hope no one important sees you. Personal grooming in Rome wasn't about looking good for yourself. It was about showing your place in society. Well-groomed, you're respectable. Dishevelled, you're suspicious. Clean-shaven, you're civilized. Beard like a goat, you're either a Greek scholar or a guy no one invites to parties. You try to strike the balance between not homeless and not rich enough to rob. And just when you think you've gotten through the worst part of the morning, let's be clear. Togas are not casual wear. They are long, heavy, woolen monstrosities that take multiple folds, a decent arm span, and sometimes an assistant to wrap correctly. Wearing one feels like trying to assemble IKEA furniture using only a mirror and a bad attitude. But if you're male, a citizen, and planning to appear in public, you're expected to wear one. You give it a try. You trip. Twice. It drags in the mud. You accidentally tuck your arm inside the wrong fold and spend 5 minutes trying to figure out how to free it without flashing a leg. Eventually, you give up and just drape it over your shoulder like a sad burrito. It'll do. Historians still debate whether most people wore togas daily or only during official events. Many believe it was reserved for court appearances, elections, or religious ceremonies, or with Evering argue it was simply the social expectation in the capital. Either way, you feel ridiculous. As you walk, you notice others fidgeting with their clothing too. A woman nearby is adjusting her stola, the long, pleated dress Roman matrons wear, while trying to keep her palla, a shawl, from slipping off her shoulders. She makes it look easy. You suspect she's been doing this since birth. You, however, just stepped into history 30 minutes ago and already look like a toga-themed disaster. There's a reason many Romans had slaves or servants to help them dress. The upper class didn't suffer this alone. But you? You're sweating, tangled, and seriously considering inventing pants. As you round the corner back toward the market area, a neighbour waves at you with his striggle still in hand. He's eating an olive and doesn't seem to care that he's half-oiled and barefoot. "Nice morning," he calls. You nod weakly and wonder if it's too late to go back to bed. It is. Because now that you're vaguely clean, marginally dressed, and uncomfortably aware of your underarms, it's time to face the first meal of the day. But don't get excited. Roman breakfast is about to disappoint you. And so, you push forward into the crowd, your poorly wrapped toga flapping, your stomach growling like a caged lion, and your strigial tucked into your belt like the world's worst accessory. Welcome to Rome, baby. Your stomach is making noises loud enough to draw concern from passers-by. It's officially time for ientaculum, the Roman equivalent of breakfast, but let's set expectations. This is not your eggs-bacon kind of scene. There's no buttered croissant waiting, no cafe with oat milk lattes. You won't even find a table. You elbow your way toward the nearest thermopolium, a kind of ancient Roman street food stall that looks like a cross between a kitchen and a garage sale. It's a little stone shopfront with a counter built of brick and sun-bleached marble, punctuated by deep round holes lined with clay jars. Those jars are the hot table. You peer in, hoping for something appetizing, but you're met with what looks like soup, smells like fermented onions, and may or may not be yesterday's leftovers. The stall's owner, a grizzled man missing half his teeth and all his cheer, slaps a piece of hard bread onto the counter with a grunt. That's breakfast. It's called panis, a flat, dry, stone-textured lump of baked grain that has the mouthfeel of a floor tile and the flavour of disappointment. You try to bite it, nearly chip a tooth, and decide to soak it in the free cup of watered-down wine that comes with the meal. The wine is sour, sharp, and vaguely vinegary, probably cheap Posca, a diluted wine vinegar mix the lower classes drank when they couldn't afford the good stuff. Some say Roman soldiers swore by it. Others say it was just the only option they had that didn't make them go blind. You chew slowly, pretending to enjoy the experience. At least it's food. Interestingly, scholars still debate just how poor Roman diets really were. While the elite feasted on delicacies from across the empire, like flamingo tongues and stuffed dormice, most commoners relied on bread, porridge, legumes, cheese, and seasonal fruits. Meat was rare. Fish sauce, however, was everywhere. Garum, to be exact. If you're unfamiliar, imagine fish rotting in the sun until it becomes liquid. Then imagine pouring it on everything. That's garum. Nope, you don't get any today. That's a luxury condiment. What you do get is more bread, possibly with a few olives, if the vendor is feeling generous. You spot a jar of dates behind the counter and reach for one, only to have your hand slapped away. That's merenda food, more of a midday snack for those who can afford to snack. You step away from the stall, still chewing the rubbery bread, trying not to choke as it fuses to the roof of your mouth like edible cement. A young boy beside you offers to trade you a boiled egg for your last coin. You hesitate. The egg is suspiciously green around the edges. You decline. He shrugs and eats it anyway. It's at this moment you realise there is no breakfast hour in Rome. People just eat whenever their schedule and budget allow. There's no sitting down for a family meal, no warm pancakes stacked high. Meals are taken standing up, on the go, elbow to elbow with strangers while dogs circle your feet, hoping you'll drop something. The city is fully awake now. The streets are a blur of movement, vendors shouting prices, ox carts lumbering by with creaky wheels, and young men rushing to apprenticeships or temples. A man in a senator's tunic passes by, flanked by two bodyguards who look like they were carved from granite and then told never to smile. He doesn't eat here. He probably hasn't seen stale bread in a decade. You wander away from the stall and pass a woman boiling lentils over a clay stove. She stirs slowly, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. A curious chicken hops onto her cart and pecks at a fig. She swats it away with practiced ease. "Not today, Julius," she mutters. The chicken, presumably named after Caesar, squawks indignantly and flaps off. You munch on the last of your bread as you stroll through the district, observing other Romans in their morning patterns. Some are already deep into business, negotiating loudly in front of the tabernacle. And then you see it. A fruit vendor. He has figs. Actual, ripe figs. The kind that look like nature's candy and probably taste like salvation. You approach him, hopeful. "Whoa, Cistercius," he says. You check your pouch. You have half that. He shrugs. "Go eat a rock." You consider it. Instead, you shuffle away, brushing crumbs off your tunic. Your breakfast may have been disappointing, but at least it was edible. Probably. You're not entirely convinced that bread didn't contain a fossil. As you continue down the street, you notice the smell of baking. Fresh bread? Pastries? Your stomach leaps. Nope, it's libum, a sacrificial cake. being burned at a nearby shrine. A priestess chants softly as she tosses honey and cheese onto the coals. The scent is divine. You linger a moment, letting the sweetness fill your nose. Then she glares at you. You shuffle away. Religion permeates daily life in Rome. There's a god or goddess for everything. Roads, doors, wells, childbirth, beekeeping. You pass half a dozen small shrines before breakfast ends. Some are dedicated to Lares and Penates, the household gods that protect the family. Others are for Mercury, Jupiter, or even Janus, the two-faced god of beginnings. People stop and mumble prayers, leaving offerings of coins or food. You consider leaving a piece of your breakfast, but you suspect the gods would return it out of pity. Some fringe historians suggest the sheer number of deities served as a psychological strategy, a way for Romans to feel control over an otherwise chaotic world. Others think it was simply woven so deeply into the culture that even the skeptical couldn't escape it. Either way, religion was everywhere, even in your stale bread. As the sun rises higher, the city becomes hotter, noisier, more crowded. You pass a man selling roasted chickpeas and nuts, the Roman version of street snacks. A group of children dart past, one of them clutching a carved wooden hoop, the others chasing him through traffic like it's a full diameter sport. And then there's the noise, constant, relentless, ever-present. A cart hits a pothole and jolts its load of amphorae. A donkey brays in complaint. A woman yells at her husband for forgetting the laundry again. Two drunks argue about gladiator stats. It's barely mid-morning. Interestingly, historians still can't agree on how chaotic Roman streets really were. Some argue that the city was a meticulously organized marvel of engineering and order. Others claim it was a madhouse with rats, noise, and body odor doing most of the population control. Judging by your current surroundings, it's probably both. Eventually you find a spot to lean, a shady column outside a butcher's shop, and take a moment to breathe. You survived Roman breakfast, barely. You're not full, you're not happy, and you're definitely not clean, but you're still standing. Just don't get too comfortable. Because the next item on today's to-do list? Working a job that might make you nostalgic for that sponge on a stick you saw earlier. But for now, take one last bite of bread, sip the last of your vinegar water wine, and enjoy the calm before the labour storm. You haven't even finished swallowing the last bite of your brick-shaped bread when reality taps you on the shoulder. Work. Because in ancient Rome, unless you're rich enough to spend your mornings philosophizing in a garden, or lounging around dictating poetry to a literate slave, you're expected to earn your keep. And by earn, we mean sweat. There's no such thing as a LinkedIn profile or remote work in this world. Your options? Manual labour, skilled crafts, or serving someone wealthier than you until your back gives out or they forget to feed you. Welcome to the job market, Roman edition. Let's say today, you're a labourer, a general labourer. That means someone with no particular skill except having functional arms and a tolerance for being yelled at. You're part of the invisible force that keeps the city running. And that force gets paid pennies. You head toward the forum where job opportunities often arise, hoping to get picked for something less miserable than usual. Along the way you pass a crew of men unloading stone blocks, another group chiselling inscriptions, and yet another hauling buckets of concrete for repairs on a bathhouse wall. The smell of lime dust and exhaustion fills the air. You already feel tired, and you haven't even lifted anything yet. By the time you reach the open hiring area, a few foremen are pacing around like ancient recruiters, shouting offers. 3 sesterces to carry bricks, 2 for sweeping the villa courtyard. Who can handle livestock without crying? You get picked for a simple gig, hauling amphorae of wine from one warehouse to another. Easy, right? Wrong. Each amphora weighs enough to make your spine question its life choices, and they don't come with handles designed for comfort. You hoist one onto your shoulder and immediately regret not pretending to be sick today. The warehouse is 2 streets away, uphill, on cobblestones, through foot traffic, past 2 particularly aggressive geese. Ancient Rome, where even birds hate you. And here's the kicker. There are no wheelbarrows. Not in this part of town. Those were reserved for construction crews or wealthier clients. You're carrying this thing old school, by raw willpower and whatever's left of your breakfast. Let's pause to reflect on Roman labour conditions. Historians generally agree that while some skilled trades, like mosaic artists, potters and metalworkers, could earn a decent wage, the vast majority of labourers lived paycheck to paycheck, or more accurately, denarius to denarius. There was no retirement plan, no union and no safety net. If you got injured, you were either patched up with herbal goo or replaced like a broken stool. You pass a man sweeping the threshold of a senator's home, meticulously arranging flower petals. He's paid more than you for that, because aesthetics. Meanwhile, your back is screaming, and you're sweating through your itchy tunic like a human fountain. After the fourth trip with the wine jars, you pause to catch your breath, leaning against a wall that probably hasn't been cleaned since Julius Caesar had a good day. Your arms feel like overcooked noodles, and there's a suspicious buzzing in your left ear. You glance across the street and spot another type of worker, a teacher, litter relator, leading a gaggle of wealthy boys through their grammar drills. He looks frazzled, clutching a scroll like it's the last thread of his sanity. One of the boys is throwing date pits at his friend, another is reciting lines from Virgil with all the passion of a bored squirrel. Teaching in Rome, not the noble profession you might imagine. Unless you ran your own elite school, and good luck with that, you were underpaid, overworked, and some historians argue the Roman education system was ahead of its time, encouraging rhetoric, philosophy, and literature. Others suggest it mostly served to reinforce class structure. Only the sons of the elite had access to real education, while the rest learned trade, toil, or tricks. You watch the poor teacher flinch as one kid kicks over an inkwell. You exchange a look, mutual suffering, different genres. Then there's the bathhouse worker, scrubbing sweat and grime from benches with a reed brush, while dodging verbal abuse from half-naked aristocrats. And the fullones, or Roman launderers. Let's just say their job involved stomping on clothes in vats of human urine to get the stains out. Yes, urn. Again, Rome had a very flexible relationship with bodily fluids and their usefulness. You briefly consider that line of work, then remember the smell, and continue on your wine-hauling journey. As you pass through a back alley, you notice a small bakery. The baker is already sweating over his oven, shoveling round loaves of pani quadratus in and out of the heat with rhythmic precision. He's got flour on his face, burns on his arms, and the tired look of someone who hasn't slept since the Republic fell. Still, the scent of fresh bread gives you a flicker of hope, until you realise it's all reserved for delivery to a nearby patrician household. Of course it is. You deliver your last amphora, shoulders numb, fingers aching, and the foreman tosses you a few coins without looking up from his tally board. You barely have time to count them before you're shoved aside by the next batch of workers arriving for their shift. There's no camaraderie here, just a constant shuffle of bodies trying not to starve. You pass a young girl sweeping the steps of a local taberna. She smiles faintly, then sneezes into the dust. You consider stopping to rest, but your stomach informs you that resting is a luxury you can't afford, not unless you want to skip lunch. Which, at the next vendor, you trade it for a small handful of lentils and a flatbread the size of your hand. Gourmet? No, but your stomach accepts the peace offering with minimal complaint. You sit on the edge of a broken column and eat in silence. Around you the sounds of labour continue. The clang of iron at the blacksmith's forge. The splash of water as street cleaners scrub the mosaic sidewalks. The relentless cries of merchants selling items that no one asked for. And somewhere, a senator reclines in his private garden, nibbling grapes and deciding whether to wear the blue toga or the purple one today. You think about your job, about how tomorrow might involve hauling marble, or cleaning out a sewer, or running messages through the heat for a scribe who doesn't remember your name. You think about how your hands already look older than your face, how your sandals are coming apart, and how your back never quite stops aching. And yet, despite all of it, there's a strange rhythm to the grind, a pulse to the city that hums through the cobblestones and echoes through your tired bones. Rome may be ruthless, but it's alive. Still, you trade 3 amphorae and your last coin for a 10-minute nap on a modern sofa. But don't get too dreamy. The day's far from over. Next up, the bathroom situation. Spoiler, it's going to get real weird. There comes a moment in every time traveler's life when you realize just how good you had it in the 21st century. For you, that moment arrives shortly after lunch, when nature calls, and ancient Rome answers with the most awkward, communal, and slightly traumatizing solution known to sanitation history. You need a toilet. Not a bush, not a random alley, which, to be fair, most people still use, but a proper Roman latrine. Because at this point, your stomach is starting to rumble in that not so suddenly something you ate well was definitely some. So you walk, and walk, and walk some more. The smell eventually guides you. It always does. Public latrines were scattered throughout the city, usually near bathhouses, marketplaces, or forum complexes. They were marvels of Roman engineering in the sense that they existed at all, but they also doubled as prime examples of what happens when the idea of privacy is treated as a weird foreign concept. You arrive at a stone building with an arched doorway and no door, just darkness and that uniquely Roman mix of ammonia, mildew, and public despair. Stepping inside, your eyes adjust to the dim light filtering through a high slit in the wall, and there it is. A long, continuous stone bench lines the wall. In the bench, evenly spaced holes front and centre. No dividers, no stools, no doors. Just a row of open, squat-sized holes, some oval, some round, all with a channel of running water beneath. This is the Roman public toilet, or as modern humans might call it, a nightmare with plumbing. You pick a hole, one that seems less worn around the edges, and hover. Immediately the man next to you strikes up a conversation about the weather. Another guy on your other side coughs, adjusts his tunic, and starts singing a folk song. You sit there, somewhere between panic and polite horror, and nod along. Romans viewed public toilets as communal, a place for business, both literal and conversational. Need to catch up on gossip, learn which senator got caught bribing the tax collector. The toilet is the place to be. Scholars still argue whether ancient Romans were genuinely unbothered by the lack of privacy, or whether this was just the grim reality of having no choice. Some believe the communal setting helped normalize bodily functions, reinforcing the collective spirit of Roman life. Others say it was just a cost-saving measure. Either way, you'd sell your soul for a locked door and some toilet paper. Speaking of toilet paper, there isn't any. What you get is the infamous tersorium, a communal sponge on a stick. That's right, a sponge, on a stick, sitting in a bucket of vinegar water, shared by everyone. You hesitate, you stare, you consider your options. None of them are good. Eventually you reach for it like Indiana Jones retrieving an ancient relic, praying the vinegar does something to sterilize the centuries of regret clinging to the sponge. You do your business as quickly as humanly possible and back away from the bench like it's about to explode. Outside, you inhale deeply, trying to forget what just happened. You will never unsee it, ever. And yet, in some strange, masochistic way, you're impressed. Rome had sewers, real ones. The Cloaca Maxima, one of the world's earliest sewage systems, drained the city's waste into the Tiber River. The fact that they even attempted sanitation, seemingly ahead of most civilizations, is a weird badge of honor. But just because the engineering was advanced, doesn't mean the experience was pleasant. Parasites were rampant. Roundworms, tapeworms, and every kind of stomach bug thrived in those conditions. In fact, archaeologists studying Roman latrine sites have found layers of parasite eggs preserved in the soil. Layers, plural. No wonder Romans loved incense. You'd be burning herbs too, if half your life smelt like open plumbing. You glance back at the latrine and swear to never return. But don't get too cocky. Unclean Roman food safety isn't exactly regulated. Odds are you'll be back within the week. To distract yourself from the trauma, you take a walk through the nearby alleyways, where laundry hangs like a chaotic patchwork across the sky. Water drips onto your head from somewhere above, and you choose not to investigate. Ignorance, in this case, is survival. A little girl runs past barefoot, laughing, holding a loaf of bread like it's treasure. A dog barks after her, but gives up halfway. You step aside as a vendor pushes a cart filled with pine nuts and candied dates. The sweet scent momentarily erases the memory of the sponge stick. Almost. Around the corner you pass another thermopolium. This one is less shady than the one from earlier. A woman ladles lentil stew into clay bowls while a man behind her roasts chestnuts over a brazier. The air here is warm and thick with spice. You consider eating again, but then your stomach whispers, "Do you really want to go back to the latrine?" You walk on. You find yourself at the edge of a fountain where a group of men are debating politics, loudly, passionately, with hand gestures that could double as semaphore. They're discussing grain prices, the latest gladiator match, and which deity deserves the biggest offering this month. A bystander jumps in to accuse them all of being ignorant fools. They all laugh. This is what passes for daily news in Rome, shouting near water. As you lean against the fountain's edge, you remember that not everyone in the city even had access to a latrine. Most poorer residents simply used chamber pots and emptied them into the street. This wasn't an accident, it was expected. In fact, there's evidence of certain streets being unofficially designated as dumping routes. You think of this as you watch a toddler squat in a corner with all the ceremony of a bird landing on a windowsill. You back away slowly. Fringe historians have even theorized that this casual attitude toward waste helped fuel certain Roman rituals involving purification and public cleanliness. Others argue that Rome's relative cleanliness compared to other ancient cities was one of the reasons it thrived for so long. But when you've seen the sponge bucket up close, you start to question all of humanity. By now, you're exhausted, not just from work and digestion, but from the sheer sensory overload that is Roman life. Everything is loud, chaotic, shared, and slightly dangerous. You make your way back toward the main street, passing a man preaching about Jupiter's wrath while waving a fig branch. No one listens. A few kids are playing Tropper, a game where they whip a top along the pavement until it spins fast enough to defy gravity. One accidentally hits a vendor's cart, and everyone ducks as pomegranates fly through the air. You glance upward at the rooftops of nearby insulae. Laundry flaps in the wind. Shadows flicker behind clay windows. Somewhere up there a woman is arguing with her husband about where to store the grain jars. Below, a man is singing in a language you don't understand, and the sun bakes everything into a golden haze. You pause and realize you've only been in ancient Rome for half a day, and already you've been scraped with a metal spoon, eaten fermented bread, hauled. And the real challenge? Dinner hasn't even started yet. But before that comes one of the most dangerous parts of the Roman experience, simply walking through the city without being run over. Yes, there's traffic, and it's worse than you think. If you thought surviving the Roman workday or navigating public restrooms was tough, buckle your sandals, because now you're about to face one of ancient Rome's deadliest challenges, walking across the street. It sounds simple enough. Just cross from one side of the road to the other. People do it every day. But in ancient Rome, it's a full black-on sport, and the prize is not getting trampled, splattered, or screamed at by someone driving a chariot like they've got somewhere important to be. Which, frankly, they probably don't. You step out from the alley where you took refuge post-latrine, and are immediately assaulted by a wall of noise. Iron-rimmed cartwheels screech as they jostle over cracked stone. Horses whinny. A pack mule brays at a passing dog. A fish vendor hollers about today's still-moving special, while a group of toga-wearing aristocrats stroll obliviously in the middle of the chaos like they own the road. Which? The street isn't wide, but it might as well be the Rubicon. You spot a shallow crossing, a few raised stones set into the road like stepping stones. These were designed to let pedestrians cross without stepping directly into the filth that flows freely down the centre of Roman roads. Yes, that's right. The middle of the street is the city's unofficial sewer, a cheerful little gutter channeling rainwater, trash, and whatever your upstairs neighbour dumped out his window this morning. You wait for a break in the carts. There isn't one. There are rules about traffic, allegedly. Certain types of carts aren't allowed during the day in some parts of the city to keep congestion down. That's the theory. The reality? Total bedlam. Deliveries run late, animals are stubborn, and nobody likes being told what to do, especially when they're hauling jars of pickled herring through a city of over 1 million cranky people. Historians still debate the true level of Rome's street chaos. Some argue that the cursus publicus, the official state-run courier and transportation service, kept things relatively organised. Others suggest that between private carts, delivery wagons, animals and crowds, the streets were like modern downtown traffic but with more goat poop and fewer brakes. You finally spot a break in the carts, take a deep breath and sprint. Well, you try to sprint. Your toga catches on your sandal strap, and you hobble awkwardly like someone trying to escape a swarm of bees while pretending they not. A cart loaded with amphorae barrels past you, the driver yelling something probably obscene, while a donkey flares its nostrils and refuses to move from the stepping stone you desperately need. You sidestep the donkey, step into the gutter, enter the gutter, and hop onto the next stone just as a wheel grazes your tunic. You let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. You're alive. Your sandal is soaked in something, but you're alive. Once on the other side, you press your back against a brick wall, panting, watching others attempt the same gauntlet. A boy with a basket of bread ducks between two oxen. A matron in a purple-dyed stola lifts her hem and scowls as a splash of gutter water nails her ankle. A wealthy man in a litter, essentially a sedan chair carried by slaves. You glance up and notice balconies jutting over the street, built from whatever scrap wood the building owner could find. One of them looks like it's held up by sheer optimism. Beneath it, a merchant tries to sell bronze trinkets while nervously glancing upward, as though expecting the entire upper floor to fall on his head at any moment. And he should be nervous. Roman insulae, those apartment buildings housing most of the city's population, were notorious for collapsing or catching fire. Emperor Augustus even passed building regulations because so many structures were toppling over like dominoes. Not that it helped much. Landlords built them as tall and cheap as possible, squeezing families, shopkeepers, and even livestock into every available nook. One fringe theory suggests that the constant flow of people and carts actually helped reinforce the city's social cohesion, forcing different classes to rub elbows, dodge poop together, and collectively complain. Others believe it only heightened tensions, especially in poorer neighborhoods where crime and overcrowding made every street corner a potential brawl. You see some of that tension now as two men argue over the cost of a chicken. One swears it was plumper when I bought it, while the other accuses him of witchcraft. The chicken, for its part, looks confused and slightly embarrassed. A crowd gathers. You move along quickly. And then, as if summoned by your aching feet, you stumble upon a shoe vendor. His wares are laid out on a cloth near the road. Simple leather sandals, a few pairs of hobnailed boots, and a single glorious pair of red-dyed calci, soft leather shoes usually reserved for Roman elites. Quietly a crouch to examine a sandal that doesn't look like it's been chewed on by rats. The vendor smiles. 5 sesterces. You shake your head, too rich for your blood. You thank him and move on. Your own sandals are starting to blister the sides of your feet. Roman shoes weren't exactly known for arch support or comfort, and there's no left or right shoe, they're just shoes. If you're lucky, the leather is soft enough not to draw blood. If not, well, you just get used to walking funny. You pass another stall selling used clothing, tunics with sweat stains, patched cloaks, and belts that have clearly seen better days. Everything smells like vinegar and goat hair. But it's honest work, and the seller, it's a reminder that everyone in Rome is hustling. From the highest patrician to the lowest beggar, survival means movement. You can't stop, you can't wait, because the city doesn't slow down for anyone, not even you. Your journey takes you past a construction site where workers are laying new paving stones. One man is carving Latin letters into a milestone while another chews on dried fruit with a hammer tucked behind his ear. They pause briefly to let a chariot roar past, then get back to work without comment. At the edge of the road, a group of children gather to watch a street performer juggle flaming torches while singing a bawdy tune about Venus and a very unlucky blacksmith. Coins clink into a clay bowl. You toss one in and move on. And then, boom, a sudden noise behind you. A cart's axle snaps, and the entire load of wine jars crashes into the street, sending red liquid gushing into the gutter. People shout. A barrel rolls dangerously close to your ankle. You hop aside just in time. The driver flails. A merchant screams about his damaged goods. A bystander tries to collect spilled wine in a broken cup. It's chaos. Normal, everyday, glorious chaos. You finally retreat to a quieter side alley and lean against the wall, heart still racing. You've crossed a street, dodged carts, avoided donkeys, and witnessed 3 minor arguments and 1 wine explosion, all in less than an hour. And this is just walking in Rome. As you catch your breath, a man with a lute strolls by, singing softly about the Tiber at sunset. His voice is gentle, melancholy, and for a moment the city's roar fades behind him. You watch him disappear around the corner and almost feel at peace, until you remember your next stop, fashion, or more accurately, how Roman clothes will test your patience, your balance, and your tolerance for scratchy wool. Hope you're good at wrapping fabric, because togas are back on the agenda. You've survived breakfast, work, public restrooms, and Roman traffic. You've been nearly trampled by carts, flirted with food poisoning, and now your feet feel like they're made of lead wrapped in sandpaper. So naturally, it's time to deal with Roman fashion, an ancient and noble art form designed to make you sweat, scratch, and wonder who thought wool was a good idea in a Mediterranean climate. You've seen the togas by now, flowing fabric, pristine white folds, an air of effortless grace. On statues. In reality, togas are less about elegance and more about fabric wrestling. You've been dodging the toga since dawn, but now you're headed somewhere that requires it. A temple, a client meeting, or maybe you're trying to impress the part. First, let's establish a key fact. Togas are awful. They're huge, sometimes up to 20 feet long and made of heavy wool. Not linen, not cotton. Wool. Imagine wrapping yourself in a damp picnic blanket during summer and then being expected to look dignified. That's the Roman dress code. You stand in front of a cracked bronze mirror and give yourself a motivational nod. You can do this. You grab the folded sheet of doom and try to drape it just like you've seen the elite do. Over the left shoulder, under the right arm, up again, loop, fold, tuck. It's like wrapping a burrito, but you can't yell at you in Latin. You get halfway through the process and realize your tunic is too short underneath. You fix that. Then the toga slips. You fix that. Then the whole thing unravels while you bend down to tie your sandal. You fix that by swearing under your breath and starting over. After your 5th attempt, you end up with something that vaguely resembles a toga, if you squint and tilt your head. Your left arm is basically trapped in the folds, your right side is overheating, and you've begun to understand why so many Roman politicians always look annoyed in sculptures. Historians still debate how common togas actually were in daily life. Some say only Roman citizens were allowed to wear them, and even then they reserved them for special occasions. Others believe men wore them regularly to show off status. What's agreed upon is that nobody liked them. They were difficult, hot, and completely impractical for walking long distances or, heaven forbid, using the bathroom. You finally stumble outside, to go barely holding together, sweat already pooling in the small of your back. A breeze hits you, and the entire right side flaps open like a curtain. You yank it back into place and pretend no one noticed. They definitely know. A man walking past nods approvingly. Nice toga. You wrap that yourself? You smile awkwardly. Of course. He laughs. First time, huh? You nod. He claps you on the back. Don't worry, you only need about 10 years of practice. Now, if you're a woman in ancient Rome, your clothing comes with its own complicated layers. The standard outfit is the stola, a long, plaited garment worn over a tunic and belted at the waist. Add a palla, a sort of shawl or cloak, and you're ready for any respectable outing. But don't get too comfortable. That palla needs to be draped just so, one side over the shoulder, the other hanging just low enough to suggest modesty but not so low that it becomes a tripping hazard. You're expected to glide gracefully, like a marble statue come to life. Except you're wearing layers of itchy wool, your hair's pinned up with something that doubles as a sewing needle, and your feet are bleeding from sandals with zero arch support. Some elite women take fashion further. Elaborate hairstyles, dyed robes, expensive jewellery imported from the East. You pass one now, her hair piled high in intricate coils, her dress dyed a deep saffron yellow, her ears dripping with pearls that probably cost more than your life. She looks like a goddess, She probably feels like a prisoner inside a moving sauna. There's a fringe debate among historians about how far Roman women could push fashion without attracting social criticism. Some scholars argue they had more freedom than previously thought, especially in the later empire. Others claim public modesty rules kept women from expressing too much individuality. Judging by the expressions of the men ogling her and the glares of the matrons nearby, you'd say the answer is, it's complicated. You make your way through the market square, trying not to trip on your toga while everyone else moves with the confidence of people born in this cloth. A few young men are walking around bare-chested in short tunics, labourers, most likely. Their clothes are simple, their feet dusty, their bodies glistening with sweat. You envy them. Togas may be the badge of Roman citizenship, but right now, you'd trade that badge for a pair of shorts and a tank top. Just when you think you've gotten used to the folds, you reach down to pick up a coin you dropped, and the toga completely betrays you. It slips from your shoulder, tangles around your knees, and before you know it, you're hugging the cobblestones like a failed acrobat. A nearby child claps. He fell like a senator. Thanks, kid. You scramble up, brushing dust from your tunic, redraping the toga with all the grace of a man caught in a laundry net. A sympathetic old man hands you a bronze pin. Here, use this, or you'll keep flashing people. You nod gratefully and secure the folds. Apparently many Romans used fibulae, brooches, to keep their garments together. You're not sure why you didn't start there. Feeling slightly more secure, you continue your stroll. And now, for the strangest part of Roman fashion, colour codes. If your toga is pure white, you're probably running for office. If it has a solid purple stripe, you're a senator. If it's solid purple, you're either the emperor or in big trouble for impersonating him. If you're wearing black, you're in mourning. And if you're wearing red, you might be a priest, or just someone who really likes red. Even slaves had a kind of uniform. Simple tunics, often undyed and coarse. They weren't allowed to wear the toga at all, as it was a symbol of citizenship. You think back to the man who hired you to haul wine earlier. He was wearing a faded toga with a small tear. He wasn't rich, but he had rights. In Rome, your clothes speak before you do. You finally reach your destination, an open-air forum surrounded by columns and filled with people doing very important things. Some are reading proclamations, others are arguing philosophy. A few are just pretending to be busy while hoping someone hands them grapes. You sit on a step, trying to look composed. Your toga is holding, barely. A man nearby leans over. You know, you'd be more comfortable without it. You laugh, I believe it. He shrugs. But then you'd just be another tunic-wearing nobody. And the Empire already has plenty of those. You nod. He's not wrong. In Rome, clothing isn't just fabric. It's identity, status, and survival. The wrong colour gets you mocked. The wrong pinning gets you exposed. The wrong fold can send you sprawling into a fountain. But as the sun warms your faith, and the crowd around you buzzes with arguments, laughter, and merchant chants, you feel strangely Roman. Uncomfortable, sweaty, overlaid with Roman. But Roman nonetheless. And just when you think you've mastered the art of draping and dodging, a young servant rushes by with news. The bathhouse is open. Time to freshen up. You look down at your sweat-stained, dust-covered toga and sigh. You know what's coming. You're going to undress. In public, with strangers, in a giant echoing room filled with steam and social expectations. Welcome to the Roman bathhouse. If ancient Rome had a version of a social media feed, it wasn't TikTok. It was the Thermae, the public bathhouse, the place where everything happened and nothing was private. Gossip, deals, arguments, awkward nudity, questionable water hygiene. It's all there, swirled together in a steamy marble chamber, echoing with splashes, chatter, and an occasional scream when someone steps into the caldarium too quick. You've heard whispers about Roman baths all morning. People mention them like they were some magical retreat, a blend of hygiene, relaxation, and high society. So here you are now, standing at the wide, arched entrance of a thermae, squinting into the misty shadows and hoping, just hoping, this will be better than the public toilet fiasco earlier. Spoiler, it's only marginally better. First off, you have to pay. Not much, just a couple of asses, small bronze coins, not the animals, but it still stings. You fork over the money and step through the stone threshold, instantly enveloped in warm, damp air that smells like lavender oil, old sweat, and the ghosts of hygiene decisions past. The first room is the appetitarium, the changing area. It's cavernous, loud, and lined with benches and open cubbyholes for storing your stuff. And here's where things get real. Everyone is naked. Like, unapologetically, loudly, confidently naked. You hesitate, you stall, you pretend to be very interested in the architecture, which consists of cracked murals of dolphins, gods, and one weird-looking horse. But eventually, there's no more delaying. You take off your toga, which immediately collapses into a wrinkled puddle like it's given up, fold it badly, and stuff it into the nearest cubby. And there you stand, bare, vulnerable, slightly cold. A stocky man nearby grins. First time? Is it that obvious? He laughs. Don't worry, nobody cares here. Just don't drop the strigil. You nod, unsure whether that's a joke or advice. A strigil, of course, is the curved metal scraper Romans use instead of soap. Soap exists in some corners of the empire, but it's considered barbaric by many Romans. Real hygiene? That's oil. Slather it on, sweat it out, and scrape it off. It's like a car wash for humans. And now, you're hungry again. Just in time for a traditional Roman dinner. Which, as you'll soon learn, is less about eating and more about politics, performance, and praying you don't get served flamingo tongue. So here you are, clean, shiny, with olive oil residue, and tired. You've been told the wealthy dine in style, reclining on couches, being fed grapes by servants while musicians serenade them. What you haven't been told is that it's also a high-stakes social game filled with subtle insults, political manoeuvring, and enough food to make you question every dietary decision you've ever made. You step into a triclinium, the formal dining room, where marble floors gleam beneath flickering oil lamps, and the walls are adorned with frescoes of gods, nature, and mythological creatures. 3 couches arranged in a U-shape surround a low table, set with plates, goblets, and an impressive array of dishes. You take a deep breath and recline on your left elbow, mimicking the posture of those who clearly know what they're doing. It feels unnatural, your legs awkwardly stretched out, and the weight of your toga threatening to slip off your shoulder. The host, a senator with an air of importance and a strong scent of expensive perfume, welcomes you with a nod. You smile politely, hoping no one notices the fact that your sandals are still damp from the bathhouse plunge. Now, here's where Roman dinners get interesting. The meal begins with the gustatio, the appetizer course. You're offered moretum, a pungent cheese and herb spread, and more olives than you can count. A servant ladles thick, garlicky lentil soup into shallow bowls. You take a cautious sip, your tongue tingling from the garlic, wondering if this is what gladiators eat before battle. Next come the main courses, or prima mensa. You're served an astonishing variety of food, much of it unfamiliar and occasionally unsettling. Fish sauce, garum, is drizzled liberally over everything. Meat dishes include boar, wild hare, and sometimes exotic birds. You spot a platter of stuffed dormice, delicately seasoned and arranged like miniature roast chickens. You don't ask how they taste. There's also a dish of flamingo tongue, prized by the wealthy for its texture and rarity. You discreetly slide it away from your plate, hoping no one sees. A slip like that could be taken as an insult, or worse, an invitation to debate your place in society. Historians still debate whether these extravagant meals were common or rare indulgences. Some argue that only the elite had access to such variety, while the majority of Romans ate far simpler dinners of bread, vegetables, and the occasional egg or fish. Others believe the banquets were more about showmanship than eating. You realize this firsthand, as your host launches into a monologue about recent political machinations. Each course is punctuated by speeches, jokes, and the occasional veiled insult directed at a rival sitting across the room. You nod along, pretending to understand Latin wordplay, while silently wondering if you're the punchline. One interesting tradition is the use of vomitatoria. Contrary to popular belief, these aren't rooms for vomiting, but exit passages from large amphitheatres. However, some elite diners supposedly did induce vomiting between courses to make room for more food. Talk about dedication. You decide to skip that trend? As the meal progresses, wine flows freely, sometimes diluted, sometimes strong enough to loosen tongues and patience. You try to keep pace, but find yourself politely sipping, aware that drunkenness can be dangerous in this crowd. A spilled goblet could mean lost favour, or worse. Between courses, musicians play lyres and flutes. Dancers entertain. Poets recite verses that are alternately beautiful and incomprehensible. You feel like you've stepped into a play where you don't know the script. Suddenly your host gestures to a slave who brings in a small tray. On it is a selection of fruits: figs, pomegranates, and dates. The sweetness is a welcome relief after the heavy meat and fish sauce. You bite into a fig, juice dripping down your chin, and laugh silently at the absurdity of your situation. Amidst all this, you overhear whispered conversations about the emperor, upcoming elections, and rumours of conspiracies. This dinner is not just a meal, it's a battleground of power, influence, and secrets. You spot a man discreetly passing a folded scroll to a companion. You wonder what deals are being made, alliances forged, or betrayals plotted. Despite the opulence, there's an undercurrent of tension. A careless word, a misstep, or a poorly timed joke could turn the evening sour. As the night wears on, the meal winds down with the secunda mensa dessert. Honey-soaked cakes, nuts, and fruit pastries arrive. You savour a slice of libum, a sweet cheesecake, grateful for the familiar flavour. Finally, the host thanks everyone for attending. You stand, stiff and tired, and realise you've been reclining on that couch longer than you've been awake all day. Outside, the air is cooler. The city has quieted a bit, but the distant hum of life continues. You make your way back to your insula, your stomach full but your mind racing with everything you've seen. Roman dinners aren't just about food. They're a glimpse into the heart of a society that's as complex as it is chaotic. And after the feast comes entertainment. If you thought gladiators were just for the Colosseum, you're about to learn otherwise. After dinner, the city shifts into a different rhythm, the spectacular phase of Roman life. Entertainment in Rome wasn't just a pastime. It was a vital social glue, a political tool, and for some, a thrill-seeking addiction that bordered on the macabre. And tonight, you're about to experience a very family-fled kind of entertainment, Roman style. You make your way through the winding streets toward the amphitheatre. The crowd is already gathering, filling the stone tiers of the Colosseum or whichever local arena is hosting tonight's spectacle. Vendors shout, selling nuts, figs, and bread rolls, while street performers dazzle passers-by with juggling and acrobatics. Inside, the amphitheatre is a buzzing hive of anticipation. You find a seat among citizens, slaves, and freedmen, all here for the same reason: to witness gladiators, beast hunts, and occasionally executions. The air smells of sweat, dust, and roasted chestnuts, with an undercurrent of tension. Gladiatorial combat is the headline act. You watch as the gates open, and two armoured men step into the arena, their faces set in grim determination. The crowd roars. The fight is fierce but controlled, with moments of theatrical flourish. It's a deadly dance, and sometimes a fatal one. Historians still argue about the origins and evolution of gladiatorial games. Some say they began as funeral rites to honour the dead. Others believe they were borrowed from Etruscan or Samnite rituals. What's clear is that by your time in Rome, they've become an essential part of the city's identity, both a spectacle and a brutal reminder of power. But gladiators aren't the only performers. Next come the venesations, beast hunts. Enormous cages are rolled into the arena, and exotic animals like lions, bears, and elephants are released to face trained hunters. You watch in mixed awe and horror as the beasts battle each other, and sometimes the hunters. The fights are dangerous and unpredictable, a wild contrast to the choreographed duels of gladiators. You notice the crowd's reactions. Children cheer, women clutch their shawls, and old men nod approvingly. For many, these games are a thrilling escape from daily struggles, a chance to witness courage, violence, and survival play out in a grand theatre. Then come the darker moments. Public executions. Criminals, slaves, and prisoners of war are sentenced to death in front of the audience. Some are thrown to wild beasts, others are forced into mock battles. You avert your eyes as a condemned man is dragged forward, his fate sealed. The crowd's mood shifts, a let it function, a reminder that the city's laws are enforced not just by words but by spectacle. Some fringe scholars argue that executions served as both punishment and public deterrent, while others see them as state-sponsored theatre meant to reinforce social order. Either way, they're deeply unsettling. You try to focus on the lighter side. Acrobats flit through the air, musicians play lively tunes, and clowns entertain the crowd with slapstick humour. A mime acts out a tragic love story, eliciting laughs and tears. Nearby, a vendor hands you a roasted dormouse on a stick, a delicacy you're not ready to try. Instead, you nibble on a bread roll and sip watered wine, your heart pounding from the adrenaline. The arena itself is an architectural marvel. Built with arches and vaults, it can hold tens of thousands of spectators. You admire the engineering as you overhear a conversation between two men debating whether the games are morally justifiable or a necessary evil. One argues they promote courage and discipline. The other claims they desensitize the populace to violence. It's a debate as old as Rome itself. As darkness falls, torches are lit, casting flickering light over the spectators. The final act is a grand procession of gladiators, hunters, and officials. The crowd stands and cheers, some waving cloths, others raising fists. You stand too, feeling a strange mix of exhilaration and exhaustion. The day has been long, filled with toil, spectacle, and survival. As you leave the arena, the city streets are alive with night vendors and latecomers. The smell of roasting meat and spiced wine mingles with the cool evening air. You walk back to your insula, muscles aching and minds swirling. Today you've seen the grandeur and brutality of Rome laid bare, a city that demands resilience and rewards spectacle. Tomorrow the cycle will begin again, but for now, you allow yourself a small smile. You survived another day. So, you've survived the amphitheatre's thrills, the public bath's awkwardness, and that brutal toga wrestling match. Congrats. But now, brace yourself for a completely different kind of Roman experience, the military life. Because in Rome, the army wasn't just an occupation, it was a way of life, a brutal school of discipline, and, if you made it out alive, a passport to citizenship or retirement land. You wake up the next morning, way earlier than you want of course, to the sound of shouting, the clank of armour, and the gruff commands of centurions. The barracks are crowded, cramped, and smell like a mix of unwashed bodies, boiled leather, and, well, you don't want to know. You pull on your lorica segmentata, the segmented plate armour that feels heavier than your entire existence, and strap your gladius to your side. The helmet pinches your head like a vice, and your sandals, called caligae, are already cutting into your feet. This isn't a fashion statement, it's a survival kit. Your day starts with drills, endless, exhausting, soul-crushing drills. You march in formation, practicing turns, weapon strikes, and shield walls until your muscles scream. The officers bark orders in booming voices, and there's no room for error. A slip-up might earn you a flogging, or worse, a trip to the decimation squad, where 1 in every 10 men was executed by his own unit as punishment. Some scholars argue decimation was more myth than widespread practice, used primarily as a threat to maintain discipline. Others believe it was brutal reality, a constant reminder that the army was a machine that tolerated no weakness. As you march, you sweat through your armour under the Mediterranean sun. The dust clings to your skin like a second layer. Your feet ache, blistered from miles of uneven roads and rocky terrain. There's no rest until sunset. Only training, patrols, and guard duty. Your meals are simple. Hard bread, salted pork, and cheap wine called posca, a diluted vinegar mix that's barely drinkable, but keeps the scurvy away. You'd kill for a warm bath and a clean bed. At night, you sleep in wooden bunks in tight quarters. Rats are common visitors. You share space with men who snore, cough, and talk in their sleep about home, glory, or the woman who dumped them last week. But the army isn't just about hardship. It's a brotherhood, a structure, and for many a ticket to something better. Veterans receive land or pensions. Some rise through the ranks, gaining influence and respect. The army is one of the few places where a poor plebeian might change his destiny. You hear stories from fellow soldiers. Some fought alongside Julius Caesar. Others survived the harsh deserts of North Africa. The army is a melting pot of cultures, languages, and ambitions. You practice with your gladius against training dummies, imagining the chaos of real battle, the clang of steel, the roar of the crowd, the weight of survival on your shoulders. You dream of glory, but fear the gruesome reality. Roman military medicine is rudimentary. A broken limb might be set with splints, infections cauterized with hot irons, and wounds treated with herbal poultices. Surgeons existed, but success was hit or miss. Amputations were common, often performed without anesthesia. You shudder thinking about it. One veteran warns you to avoid getting sick. Disease claims more soldiers than swords. Typhus, dysentery, and malaria spread rapidly in camps. Your only defense is cleanliness and luck. Between drills, you bond with comrades over stories, jokes, and songs. Despite the hardship, there's camaraderie, a sense of shared purpose and resilience. Some officers are fair, some cruel. You learn to read people quickly, to avoid trouble, and to work smarter, not just harder. As days turn into weeks, you begin to understand the rhythm of military life. The strict discipline sharpens your mind and body. The training prepares you not just for war, but for survival in an unforgiving empire. You reflect on the soldiers who built roads, guarded frontiers, and expanded Rome's reach. Their sacrifices are woven into the empire's fabric. But for now, you're just trying to survive the next drill without collapsing. As the sun sets behind the hills, you stand watch, sword in hand, heart pounding. Tomorrow will bring more challenges, more marches, and maybe, just maybe, a taste of the glory that made Rome immortal. By now, your days in ancient Rome have been a whirlwind, a relentless series of challenges, surprises, and moments that make you wonder how anyone managed to keep their sanity. But just when you think you might be getting the hang of this chaotic empire, you face one of the biggest hurdles of all: Roman medicine. Let's be honest, right off the bat, Roman medical care was a mixed bag. If you got a paper cut, sure, you might be fine. But if you broke a bone or caught something nasty, well, good luck. You awake one morning, feeling a sharp pain in your side. Maybe you slept wrong on that stone slab, or maybe it's the start of something more serious. You decide to seek help, which means one of two things: visiting a local doctor, or relying on home remedies that sound like they came from a witch's cookbook. You find a medicus in a small, cluttered room lined with jars, dried herbs, and instruments that look like torture devices. The man wears a white toga, but he's less doctor and more way a part scientist, part mystic. He examines you, poking and prodding while muttering prayers to Asclepius, the god of healing. Roman medicine was a blend of empirical observation and superstition. Doctors knew some anatomy from gladiator autopsies and surgical texts, but much of the practice in balancing the four humours, blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. An imbalance meant illness, and treatments aimed to restore harmony, often through bloodletting or purging. You're handed a bitter concoction made from garlic, honey, and crushed myrrh. Drink this thrice daily, the doctor says solemnly. It will purge the infection and strengthen the humours. You grimace but swallow. After all, it's better than the alternative, a leech. Yes, leeches were a common Roman medical tool. They'd attach these slimy creatures to your skin to suck bad blood out of your body. The idea was to remove impurities, though we now know it often just weakened patients further. There is also cauterization, burning wounds to stop bleeding or prevent infection. Imagine a hot iron pressed against flesh, accompanied by screams muffled by olive oil and prayer. Surgeons existed too, especially in the military. They performed amputations, removed arrows, and treated battle wounds with surprising skill given their limited resources. Instruments like scalpels, forceps, and bone drills have been found in archaeological digs, but anesthesia was primitive, mostly wine or herbal concoctions. You try not to think about how painful that must have been. Some historians argue that Roman medical knowledge laid the groundwork for modern practices, citing texts by Galen and Hippocrates that influenced medicine for centuries. Others point out that much treatment was ineffective or harmful, with a heavy dose of superstition and ritual. Outside the doctor's office, people relied on household remedies passed down through generations. Honey was a universal healer, used for wounds and coughs. Garlic was believed to boost strength and fight infection, possibly why Roman soldiers were nicknamed mule's ears. Herbs like sage, rosemary and thyme were brewed into teas or applied as poultices. You remember a neighbour mixing crushed beetles and wine to treat a stubborn rash. It didn't work, but she swore by it. In some cases, magic and religion overlapped with medicine. Amulets, incantations, and offerings to gods like Apollo or Minerva were common. You might be advised to sleep in a temple dedicated to healing gods, hoping for divine intervention through dreams. There was an unusual story you overheard about a wealthy Roman woman who used crocodile dung as sunscreen. The idea was to protect her skin from the sun, though you're pretty sure it did more harm than good. The fashion and beauty standards in Rome were as merciless as the city's streets. Disease was rampant in the crowded city. Poor sanitation, contaminated water, and close living quarters made the spread of illness inevitable. Plagues would sweep through neighbourhoods, and doctors had little to offer but quarantine and prayer. You hear whispers about a mysterious fever killing hundreds along the Tiber. No one knows its origin, but fear spreads faster than the illness itself. In the military camps, conditions were only marginally better. Medical tents offered basic care, but many soldiers died from infections, wounds, or exhaustion. It's said that more troops come to disease than battle. As you reflect on the fragility of health in Rome, you realize how precious each day truly is. The simplest injury or illness could spiral into disaster without proper care. You remember the man from the bathhouse who limped past you, clutching a bandaged leg. He told you a story of a wound that wouldn't heal, treated with honey and vinegar for weeks. The infection lingered, and he feared he'd never march again. But amid the grim realities, there's resilience. Families cared for the sick with herbal remedies and comfort. Some urban areas had rudimentary hospitals, known as valetudinaria, primarily for soldiers but also accessible to civilians. The belief in healing powers of water led to the popularity of baths and hot springs. People travelled miles seeking cures in mineral-rich waters, hoping for relief from pain and illness. You find yourself wishing for that kind of luck, a magical spring to wash away the city's grime and your aching body. As dusk settles, you leave the doctor's house, clutching your strange concoctions and bandages. The sun sinks behind tiled rooftops, casting long shadows over the bustling streets. Tomorrow will bring more challenges, but for now, you rest with the hope that Roman medicine might do its work. You've survived the city's streets, baths, meals and battles, but now your greatest battle might be against your own body. By now you've come to understand that the Roman Empire is a place of extremes: grandeur and grit, innovation and decay, power and poverty. But perhaps nothing exemplifies this better than the city's legal system, a tangled web of laws, customs and court drama that rules every aspect of life. If you thought navigating traffic was hard, try navigating Roman law. You wake up one morning to find yourself accused of a minor offence, perhaps an unpaid debt, a neighbourhood dispute, or trespassing on someone's property. The details are fuzzy, but one thing is clear: you need to defend yourself before the local magistrate. Welcome to the Roman court. The first step is understanding who's who. Roman law isn't just rules on paper. It's a complex hierarchy of officials, advocates and clerks, each wielding influence. The praetor presides over cases, the advocates argue for the parties, and the judices, a panel of citizens, decide the verdict. Trials can be public spectacles, drawing crowds as eager as those at the gladiator games. Your case is scheduled for the morning. You enter the basilica, a large hall where legal proceedings occur. The room is filled with murmurs, the shuffling of scrolls, and the occasional cough. You take a seat on a wooden bench, nervous and uncertain. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed man in a bright toga, stands and presents the charges against you. His voice is clear and commanding, weaving facts with accusations. The defense attorney rises to argue your case, speaking passionately about your character, your intentions, and the evidence, or lack thereof. Roman courts relied heavily on rhetoric and persuasion. It wasn't always about facts. It was about who could speak better, appeal to the judge's sense of justice or prejudice, and sway the crowd. Lawyers studied rhetoric for years, perfecting their skills. Cicero, one of Rome's greatest orators, famously defended clients with eloquence and flair. You wish you had a Cicero on your side. The trial proceeds with witness testimonies, cross-examinations, and heated exchanges. You notice that social status plays a huge role. If you're a wealthy citizen, you have more rights, a louder voice, and a better chance. If you're a slave, a woman, or a foreigner, your fate is precarious. Historians still debate how fair Roman justice really was. Some praise its detailed laws and procedures. Others criticize its biases and harsh punishments, especially toward the lower classes. Punishments range from fines and public shaming to corporal punishments, exile, or even death. One infamous penalty is damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts, where criminals were thrown to wild animals in the arena. You shudder just thinking about it. The court finally reaches a verdict. Your heart races as the magistrate speaks. You're found guilty of a minor infraction, but spares harsh punishment due to your clean record and good character. Relief floods through you. You thank the gods and the eloquence of your advocate. But the legal system isn't just about crime and punishment. It regulates property, contracts, marriage, and inheritance. Romans had detailed laws about who could marry whom, how property was passed down, and how debts were handled. You discover that disputes over land are common. Farmers fight neighbours over boundaries, merchants haggle over contracts, families argue about wills. One fascinating aspect is patria potestas, the legal authority of the male head of the family over his children and slaves. Fathers had immense power, including the right to sell family members or decide marriages. Some historians see this as harsh. Others argue it maintained family order. You also learn about citizenship laws. Being a Roman citizen comes with privileges, the right to vote, own property, and legal protections. But citizenship isn't universal. Many inhabitants of the empire are peregrini, foreigners with limited rights. Your status affects everything, from legal standing to taxation. As you navigate this maze of laws, you realize that justice in Rome is as much about social order as fairness. The system is designed to maintain the hierarchy, protect the elite, and keep the city running smoothly. You leave the court, your mind swirling with legal jargon, procedures, and the reminder that in Rome, the law is a game, and you're still learning the rules. Walking back through the bustling streets, you overhear debates about recent trials, political scandals, and rumours of reform. Some call for more rights for the lower classes, others warn against chaos. The legal system is alive, evolving, and as complicated as the city itself. You think about your own place in this vast empire, how laws shape your day-to-day life, limit your freedoms, and sometimes offer protection. You feel both small and part of something immense. The sun dips low, and shadows stretch across the forum. As you cross the street, narrowly dodging a cart, you marvel at the resilience required to live here. Tomorrow, you'll face new challenges, but for now, you carry the weight of Roman law, and the hope that it will treat you kindly. By now, you're well versed in the chaos, the noise, the stench, and the relentless pace of life in ancient Rome. But the sun is dipping low, the evening shadows are stretching, and you find yourself facing one of the most intimate and unpredictable challenges of Roman existence: the night. Let's start with where you sleep. Most Romans don't have the luxury of spacious bedrooms or peaceful nights. If you're a wealthy patrician, your home might have several rooms, soft beds stuffed with feathers, and thick curtains to keep out the chill and nosy neighbours. But if you're an average Roman, especially living in an insula, that overcrowded apartment building, your night's rest is another story entirely. Your insula is a towering, rickety structure built from cheap bricks and wood, stacked 5 or 6 stories high, with narrow staircases and tiny, cramped rooms. Your apartment? About the size of a small closet. You share it with your family, Maybe a couple of friends, or even a tenant or two. The walls are thin, so you hear everything. Neighbours coughing, babies crying, rats scurrying through the rafters, and the occasional argument breaking out at midnight. You lay on a straw mattress that's just barely better than the floor. Your pillow is a lumpy sack filled with chaff, and your blanket is a thin woolen cloth that barely keeps out the cold. The air is stuffy, scented with a mixture of stale cooking smoke, sweat, and the faint but persistent odour of mildew. Sleep doesn't come easily. You listen as the wind whistles through cracks in the wall, and the distant shouts of drunken revellers fade into the night. A rat scrabbles near your feet, and you flinch. Fire is a constant worry. Wooden insulae are tinder boxes, and fires spread fast in the crowded city. You recall stories of devastating blazes that destroyed entire neighbourhoods, leaving thousands homeless. Emperor Augustus even passed laws limiting the height of buildings and requiring fire breaks, but enforcement was lax. Sleep is interrupted by noises: footsteps in the hallway, the clang of a dropped pot, whispers behind closed doors. You wonder if it's a thief or a neighbour settling a score. Some nights, the street below buzzes with activity. Vendors selling late-night snacks, men arguing over dice games, or young couples sneaking away from prying eyes. Privacy is almost non-existent. You share your space with others, and everyone knows everyone else's business. Your walls might as well be paper. On top of that, the insulae often lack basic sanitation. Waste disposal is a nightmare, with chamber pots emptied into the streets below and sewer systems sometimes blocked or overflowing. You've learned to avoid the alleyway near your building after dark. It's rumoured to be a hotspot for pickpockets and worse. Roman law punishes thieves harshly, but the streets at night have their own rules. Despite all this, the city never truly sleeps. Romans enjoy socialising after sunset. Taverns and inns stay open, filled with music, laughter, and the clinking of wine cups. You might decide to join a friend at a local popina, a kind of bar serving cheap food and drink. Here, you hear stories, gossip, and sometimes plot your next day's move. Or you might simply lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sound of the Tiber River flowing under the moonlight. Sleep, when it comes, is fitful but precious. Your dreams wander between hope and fear, dreams of escaping this crowded city, of a better life, or simply of a day without blistered feet. And as dawn approaches, the city slowly wakes again, the cycle continuing. You think about the millions like you eking out their lives in this sprawling metropolis, facing danger and discomfort, yet finding moments of joy and connection. Rome is a city of contradictions, a place where glory and grime coexist, where power and poverty intertwine, where life is a constant struggle, and yet a miracle. Tonight, as you drift into sleep, you carry the city with you, the sounds, the smells, the stories. Tomorrow, you will rise and face it all again. But for now, you rest, safe, if only for a few hours, under the vast Roman sky. The sun has long set, but Rome's heart doesn't slow. Instead, the city shifts gears like a restless beast stirring in the shadows. Streets once choked with merchants and labourers now pulse with a different energy, one that hums with whispered conversations, flickering lamps, and the clatter of footsteps across worn stone. You step into the cool night air, the sky above a tapestry of stars that seem impossibly bright after the day's dusty haze. The Tiber glistens faintly in the moonlight, its steady murmur a calming counterpoint to the city's constant din. Yet even this natural lullaby is punctuated by distant voices, the occasional burst of laughter, and the faint sound of flutes playing somewhere down an alley. Rome at night is a world of contrasts. The wealthy retreat behind thick walls and iron gates, their villas quiet and guarded, lit by soft oil lamps that cast gentle shadows over marble halls. But in the crowded insulae and poorer quarters, the streets still buzz, less with commerce and more with life's gratty persistence. You find yourself wandering through these neighbourhoods, where lanterns hang crookedly from wooden beams, their flames dancing in the cool breeze. You pass by a popina, its wooden sign swinging gently. Inside, patrons sit shoulder to shoulder, drinking watered wine and swafting stories. The air smelts of roasting meat, spiced with herbs and smoke. Music drifts out. You pause, absorbing the scene. A group of young men plays dice at a table, coins clinking against stone. Their laughter is raw, real, unburdened by the pomp and ceremony of the day's events. A woman brings you more wine, her smile tired but warm. She greets you with a nod, offering a cup you decline politely. As you continue, you notice the narrow alleys thrumming with quieter, more secretive activities. Lovers sneak hand in hand behind shuttered doors. Streetwork performers juggle torches, drawing small crowds. A man dressed in simple robes offers prayers and blessings in hushed tones, candles flickering on a makeshift altar. The sacred mingles with the profane in a city that wears both like a badge. The city's darker side is never far. You see shadows lurking near corners, figures trading whispered deals. A watchman patrols, his heavy sandals thudding on stone. Crime is a constant threat, especially after dark. Pickpockets and thieves take advantage of the crowds, and even the law's reach is limited once night falls. You slip through a narrow passageway, emerging into a small courtyard where children play with wooden toys, their laughter a fragile thread of innocence in the night. Their parents call softly from open windows, the sound blending with the gentle rustling of leaves from a solitary olive tree. You think about your own place in this sprawling empire, how you navigate these streets, these shadows, these moments, always balancing hope and caution. A sudden gust carries the scent of baked bread and honey. You follow it to a small bakery, its window aglow with warmth. The baker, a stout man with flour-dusted hands, offers you a freshly baked libum, a simple honey cake. You accept, the sweetness a small comfort against the city's chill. You sit on a worn stone bench nearby, biting into the cake. The honey drips sticky and sweet, a taste that feels almost like home. Around you the city breathes, a living mosaic of stories, struggles, dreams. Above, the stars seem to pulse, as if the gods themselves are watching, silently blessing or judging. You close your eyes briefly, feeling the day's weight lift ever so slightly. The ache in your muscles, the dust in your lungs, the uncertainty of tomorrow, they all fade into the background. In this moment, beneath the vast Roman sky, you are just another soul seeking rest. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howls. A church bell tolls softly, marking the hour. The murmur of voices slows. You rise, ready to return to your cramped insula, to your straw mattress, your thin blanket, your fragile sanctuary from the world's chaos. The city will wake again, relentless and untamed, but for now, the night is yours. You walk slowly, savouring the cool air, the lingering sweetness on your tongue, the fragile peace of a city that never truly sleeps. Tomorrow, the empire will roar again, but tonight, it whispers. By the time your eyes finally close, the weight of the day settles in like a warm cloak, heavy, comforting, and a little suffocating. Rome's streets, its baths, its amphitheatres, and its endless bustle fade slowly into a quiet hum at the edge of your consciousness. The city's pulse, once so relentless, becomes a soft lullaby. You find yourself lying on your straw mattress in your cramped insular room. The faint scent of olive oil still clings to your skin, mingling with the earthiness of damp stone walls. Outside, the muffled sounds of distant conversations and the occasional clatter of a late-night vendor's cart drift in through the cracked window. You feel the uneven floor beneath you, the cool breeze from the Tiber River brushing softly against your cheek. Somewhere in the building a child stirs, and a dog barks briefly before settling down again. This is the rhythm of Roman night. You breathe deeply, letting the tension in your muscles soften, the aches from the day's toil slowly ebbing away. Your mind wanders through the day's memories, the sharp taste of Posca, the overwhelming heat of the Coldarium, the chilling plunge into the frigid Arium, the roar of the crowd in the amphitheatre, and the harsh discipline of the military drills. Each memory is a thread woven into the tapestry of a city both magnificent and merciless. You imagine the faces of the people you passed, the vendor hawking dry fish, the man sweeping the courtyard, the senators in their togas, the soldiers marching in formation. all of them living the same story, surviving the same chaos, enduring the same relentless pace. The city is a living organism, and you are a part of its breath, its heartbeat, its endless flow. You think about the layers of history beneath your feet, the foundations laid by Etruscans and Latin, the roads carved by legions, the forums where power was debated and decreed. And as sleep tugs you deeper, you understand that to live in Rome is to accept a life of contrasts, beauty and brutality, luxury and poverty, order and chaos. Your eyelids grow heavy. The city's distant hum fades to a whisper. Your breath slows, matching the gentle night breeze. You are safe here, in this moment, embraced by the ancient city's vastness and intimacy alike. Rest now, knowing that you have walked through one of history's greatest empires, survived its trials, and glimpsed its soul. The streets may awaken again with noise and frenzy, but for you the night is a sanctuary. Let the soft shadows cradle you as you drift deeper into sleep. Tomorrow holds its own stories, its own challenges, but they can wait. For now the city sleeps, and so do you. Good night, traveller.